Hello everybody, today I want to discuss another effort of our government to limit our freedom of speech, particularly that on the internet. And it comes in two separate laws. One is about the speech itself. There will be another hate speech law. First effort has been shelved because it does not meet the prerequisites of the data protection, and a second one is now in the making, that is to change our data protection laws. The latter one passed a committee, or was accepted by a committee that is composed of both chambers of our parliament, the Bundestag, which is the lower house, and the Bundesrat, being the upper house of our parliament. And they have a shared committee to negotiate contentious laws. This law, or a previous version of it, had been rejected by the upper house, that was, as I said, the Bundesrat, and it is now likely to pass both chambers because they have come to an agreement in that said committee. The lower house is the more famous parliament that I've mentioned in my videos many times. It is the Bundestag, which is the equivalent basically to the House of Representatives or the House of Commons. It is the body that is more accountable to the voters than the upper house, and it is voted, or it is elected through proportionate voting systems, or through a proportionate voting system. It's a very difficult procedure that gives a lot of power to our party leaderships, and takes a lot of power away from the citizenry. By the way it is constructed, however, it is of both chambers the one that is more accountable, and that one in reality is being as dependent on the leadership of our parties. It is also more answerable to the Chancellor and to the executive branch. So this bill, the previous bill on the data protection, had already passed this one chamber, but it was rejected by the upper house, which is the Bundesrat. The Bundesrat is composed of delegates from the nation's state. The federal government is composed of states, like in America. We call them Länder, but it doesn't really matter. And these states, they send their delegates to a Senate-style upper house. So what will be the changes to the data protection law? What can the police ask of the telephone companies and the internet providers? It is likely to become the names of the users, the addresses, and I mean both the real life names and the real life addresses of the users, as well as of course then the IP addresses of the machines, and the passwords for the social media accounts. They are also likely to be handed over to the police if that law that has now been decided by the committee, the shared committee of both chambers, ultimately goes through both sides of the parliament. And this law, when passed, will enable a second law that is envisioned by basically every single news article that I read about this topic. It is amazing. The actual target why they want these changes is they want to go after hate speech. This is enabled because the second law, the hate speech law, has to use this data protection changes because the previous version of it had been struck down by the Supreme Court because these two laws actually collided, and there was too much data protection to go ahead with a hate speech law. However, the new effort will ultimately also have its troubles because for every transfer of data from the technology companies to the police, they will need the okay from, or the warrant from, a judge. So every time when a court case comes up, or when they think there is a criminal post, they will have to go to a judge first before the police can actually work on that post. Our government actually expects that there will be 150,000 incidents when a social media platform would be forced by this hate speech law to report crime speech to the police. And 150 cases would be on the desks of the judges to be decided whether this actually can be investigated by the police. It won't happen. Our judicial system is already wildly overcharged, and it's amazing to me that they actually go so far as to think that they can burden another 150 cases on the shoulder, 150,000 cases on the shoulders of our judges. But you know, hate speech is such a threat. They believe that it warrants everything, every effort. Of course, technically, nothing would stop judges from making 150,000 additional clicks or whatever is needed to decide the cases. However, the law does actually require that there must be an impending danger to the public, so that there is this transition of data from the tech companies to the police, and that requires some scrutiny. So it's very unlikely to come, and in order to get this even to that stage where we are right now, they had to redefine what this law is supposed to protect, because we usually hear that hate speech is of course for your dignity, it is protecting you against insults, and it's basically your narcissism at the center of it. But of course, for something as precious as your personal data being disclosed to the police, the legal thresholds must be higher, and therefore they had to rework this law to protect something else, some other legal goods. And the things they have suggested in the newspaper articles that I've read about it is the bodily integrity of a person, the life, the freedom of somebody who is offended or who is attacked by speech on the internet, the sexual self-determination, or the safety of the state. So there are high bars, and the bodily integrity is very unlikely to be risked by speech on the internet. So it's very unlikely that many of these 150,000 additional cases will actually be processed. This idea to assign something else the good that is supposed to be protected has a tradition in two laws that I want to discuss with you as well. And one is the blasphemy law, that of course must not be called blasphemy law, because, same again, your belief is not important enough to warrant something like restriction of speech. That's a theory. The reality is that they just claim to protect something else, and it reads like this. It's 166 of the Penalty Code StGB. Those who offend publicly or redistribute offences against the content of a religious or ideological confession of another person in a way that could disturb the public peace is punished with up to 3 years in prison or a monetary fine. It is also punishable to insult a church or a religious community or an ideological organization within the country as a group or their building in a way that could disturb the public good. So the public good is that thing that they claim to protect. Everything can be a riot. So if your 5-year-old daughter draws a stick figure and writes Mohammed on the side, then she may disturb the peace because some other child may wish to behead her. Likewise, if you say something somebody else doesn't want to hear, you may disturb the peace. And indeed, Mrs. Christine Lambert, our Justice Minister, has said in the defense of her recent move that she sees ever more violence, or she fears that ever more violence will come out of aggressive speech. That is the theory we hear a lot from the left. In real life, if you ever look into an altercation, you will always find that the person who is maybe a bit outrageous verbally is the least likely to be the first to punch. It is always the person who can't take an insult on the chin, who can't take some speech, and will resort to violence because he has no ability to deal with things, offenses, in a civilized manner. It is never the person that says something that somebody else doesn't want to hear. It's always the person that can't hear, that can't listen to what somebody else has to say, that becomes offensive. So they have it all upside down. They make the victim the perpetrator and vice versa. And what I've translated here as ideological is the more verbatim translation would be worldviewish. Weltanschaulich, worldviewish. So it basically encompasses everything from Islam to National Socialism. If you define that as broadly as the law does, the words could basically even mean that you cannot insult even National Socialism. That's how broadly it is defined, and that is where I see a major danger of such laws, of these speech laws, because they all essentially have to be defined as that broadly, as so as not to offend a major legitimized or still somehow respected oppositional group in a population, while you latch out for some other group with your attempts. And the vagueness of it, or that the result of it, that you want to actually allow some variety but not all of it, leads necessarily to the problem that the application of the law can never be equal. There must always be a privilege of some ideologies over others, and this undermines the foundation of our political system in and of itself. Unfortunately, you cannot target either National Socialism or Islamism or Maoism or some other dreadful ideology without hurting well-meaning differences of opinion in the population. If you go down the route of limiting speech in one area, you will politicize the judicial system as such, and there's no way around it. And ultimately, such laws will always be the tools of the strongest group versus those who are upcoming, those who are criticizing the status quo. And then there is a second law that works the same way. They claim to protect something, or the lawmakers claim to protect something that, of course, were not their intention to protect. And that is Article 130 of the Penalty Code, StGB. Who disturbs the public peace by incitement to hate, by calls for violence, and by calls for arbitrary measures against a national, racial, religious, or ethnic group, against parts of society, or an individual, because of his membership to one of the aforementioned groups, will be punished with a prison sentence between 3 months and 5 years. Here again, you have as a public good, the public peace that may not be disturbed. Somebody may become violent over your words. This law is, of course, against hate, and we know already who this is directed against. We all know that the left actually does not have this entire emotion. They don't have negativity, they only have positivity. Hatred is something that is totally alien to them. They only know love. And the revolution, the Marxist revolution, will be one of compassion for the beloved capitalist who will understand the truth of socialism when the left comes after them in a peaceful and most friendly manner. At least this is the kind of rhetoric we receive from our authorities, from media. So the revolution will be through love and peace. And I think when the multinational globalist government will be erected, we will not only need a ministry of truth, but also a ministry of love. I can't hear the G's anymore. It's too much for me. The idea that you can't tell people what to feel, and the idea that some people of us are so above the human nature that they don't have entire realms of emotion. is crazy to me. And I think it's a very delusional, dangerous faith these people have. Everybody must be able to express his anger, and even in an irrational manner, because I think I am a fairly articulate person. I also would not resort to violence. I am this kind of person that seeks the verbal exchange of ideas. But there are others who don't even have that tools, and they need at least to vent off occasionally. There are valves that need to be used to let off the pressure out of the public. You cannot tell people that one side of the debate is full of anger and hate and you shouldn't listen, and the other side is only love and peace and harmony. We all know it's bullshit. We should stop it. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you soon. Bye.